I've never made this public. Being divine knows that what I'm telling you is true. And he came to me one day and he said, Howard, I think you can help me because my hands are tied. I can't be accused of, tampering. He said, I want Gil Hodges to be my manager. Gil was with Washington at the time. And I spoke to Gil, and the answer was yes. And so, you know...
Wait a minute. You're a sports reporter.
That's correct.
You entered into the industry. You tampered. You talked to Gil Hodges to ask if he wanted to become manager of the Mets. You were operating not as a reporter. Not only were you operating under the table for management, but you were trying to replace Casey Stengel, a legend, a beloved American hero, whom you personally disliked. How do you justify that?
Your words are so hypocritical. I went through this garbage with you when I brought you up to Yale to speak to my class.
I don't think we've
discussed this before. And you talked to me about ambivalence.
We've never discussed this before.
Of course we did. And you talked to me about ambivalence, and you accused me of ambivalence. And I said you had a point. Because, you see, I am unfortunately a human being, too. And I care about human beings. Now, have I done things that are not consistent totally with what a pure journalist, if there is such a thing, is to be? I suppose I have deviated. I don't apologize for that. I believed it was right for Gil Hodges to manage the Mets. I believed it would help the Mets. I believed that he would become a very significant factor in their successes. And he did. I believed he was a fine man. I knew he was a fine man. I did not believe in Casey Stengel, which is totally irrelevant. I believed that Casey Stengel hurt young people, and I think that anybody with honesty knew that. But Casey Stengel's legend was built by people that I disrespected, people of the sports print medium, and I didn't think they were servicing the public properly in what they were doing. I happened to be a terribly, terribly bright man, and I knew the people I was dealing with.
You also are a terribly arrogant man, and we're talking now about Cosell's law. You are above the law, and you're a lawyer yet.
Oh, that's garbage, and you know it. It's funny to hear you talk that way. There is a very good parallel today. I'll tell you what that parallel is. The parallel is Phil Pepe and Jack Lang, for instance, fighting desperately for their right to vote for Pete Rose to be in the Hall of Fame. It's a very apt parallel. They're concerned with their right to vote. That's interference with a private business. And I was an antidote to that. I don't apologize for it. I'm proud of it. Period. I used to be on locally, nightly. And the first time I had Ali on, he was back from Rome. He had won the gold. And he had just had a meeting with Harry Markson. And
then president of Madison Square Garden Boxing.
Yeah. But anyway, there's Ali sitting there with me. And I said, where you been? He says, oh, I'm just back from meeting with Mr. Markson in the garden and so on. I said, oh, yeah, about advances, money, you're going to fight for them. And then he suddenly looks at me and he says, you know an awful lot about this stuff, don't you? I said, well, I know an awful lot about who's running the garden, and I don't think you should be involved with that. He said, I ain't involved with no one. I ain't involved with no one. I said, I think one you should listen to is Angelo Dundee, who's your trainer. And he says, "What are you thinking, Dundee?" I said, "If I had a son who was a fighter, I wouldn't let anybody touch him but Dundee, because he knows where all the crooks are." And we hit it off very well together. And as he left me that day, he said, "I like this. You're kind of with it." I said, "You do what I tell you. You'll be all right." I was there. I lay on my belly, a relative stone's throw from building 31. I looked up and I saw those hooded faces. Never get over it as long as I live. Never get over lying there. How I even got in with Tony Triola, and I took Shirley Povich, Jim Murray, some others. I got us in as Puma shoe salesman, selling at the Puma shoe store. There I was lying there, 6.5 miles from Dachau. And finally, All had said to me, "Do you want to come in and go on the air?" I said, "No. No, Roon, I don't want to go on. I can't believe what's happened here." They said they killed 6 million of us. Now it's going to be 6,000,011. They'll never kill us all. So the next day, September 6th, Avery Brundage did his thing. I shot right to the radio headquarters, and I said, "Let the games go on." This was the ringing exhortation of a man named Avery Brundage. There was a time for Avery Brundage. It was the time of William of Orange. I was last with him at the Night of 100 Stars, when I had to bring on all of the great stars. And I tell you, there was, even in that night, though, there was joy, because I brought that man out. I brought that man out, and that crowd stood as one. And I said, "This is the greatest of all champions. His name is Muhammad Ali." And just to see those people stand and cheer him, and knowing the state he was in physically, it made my heart sing. It was a wonderful, wonderful scene. And this on a night where, behind the scenes, one of the most steadfast men I've ever known in sports, Oscar Robertson, broke down as Ali was eating and the food was slithering down his chin, and he was being fed by Howard Bingham, his photographer and his old crony. I was always concerned about the health and welfare of the men who fought for a living. And I began my crusade in 1972. The record is so clear. I went before Congressional Committee in '72 and stated my position on boxing. I called for a federal sports commissioner or a federal sports commission, and there's nothing new, therefore, in my position. It's gone on for years.
Except that there is a long distance between reform, which is what you were calling for in the '70s, and abolition. I mean, this is
abolition grew with immediacy. I made up my mind on the spot. I realized there was no hope. Once again, the boxing writers, the sport. It happened Thanksgiving Day, not that many years ago, Thanksgiving weekend. Larry Holmes against Randy Tex Cobb. And it was awful. The people in the arena screaming, "Come on, Randy, you can take it. Come on, Randy, show them your toughness." And they're screaming with joy. And Larry Holmes, to his credit, he didn't want to kill the man. I am convinced that he laid back, and I was proud of him for it.
What was going on in your mind or your gut?
My gut? This is it. I don't want to see this anymore. No more, and I can't win. Sports writers took care of that, boy. They're right there. They're always on the wrong side of the fence, morally, ethically, in every way.
They called you a hypocrite as well for waiting so long.
Of course.
Until you had made your millions, they said.
Of course. Typical, par for the course. Just don't pay any attention to the record, to what I had done before the Congress, committee after committee.